Hello and welcome. In this ambiguously entitled installment, we're taking a look at pulsating pistons. So I've set up a somewhat interesting device that is ultimately useless, but if plugged into the right contraption might actually serve a purpose. So what this is going to do is basically drop either sand or gravel and a specific number of bits of sand and gravel, depending on what button I press and the state of this lever. So as you see, I have a little label here. Up is for sand, down is for gravel. And then this button, when pressed, will drop 1 of whichever is selected, and this will drop 2 of whatever is selected, and the third one will drop 3 of whatever is selected. And it does this by sending pulses that are delayed. So here we have the switch line. It goes up and doesn't connect to any of the lines in this area yet. And then for the first 1 pulse button, the line just goes out. This repeater acts as a diode to prevent the pulse from being sent into it. Same with back there. And then it just sends this pulse down and in here. Get into the rest of that later. So then the number 2 pulse, that's better. Oh Jesus, there's a lot of stuff over there. Anyway, the number 2 pulse one sends the first pulse out this way and down the 1. So that's the first pulse. The second pulse goes through these delayers and in there, so that you get 2 pulses on the same line. One is being delayed using 4 repeaters. And then the 3 pulse button sends the line down, goes in here, where it then sends 1 pulse down, and then sends the other pulse down the first delayer. So all it does for this particular line is send it down into the 2 pulse area, and then it just takes it down further and then into another delayer. This time the delayer is twice as long as this one. See, 1, 2, 3, 4, and this one is 8. So it goes in, around, through the other 4, and then sends the pulse down the exact same line that our single pulse button does. And then in the end, they all meet up in this area here, where they combine into 1 wire, which plugs into an AND gate. What I've done with this particular area is sort of set up an if-else gate, or condition branch, sort of, so that whenever the switch is off, as you see right now the switch is off, it will go down, and first it will go down here, and since it's off, this AND will also be off. When a pulse runs down the line, this area will be on, but since the switch is off, this part of the AND gate will be off as well. For more information on AND gates, just either look at the wiki or look at my previous video in the piston series. But because this line is off, even if this line is on, this torch will still remain off, and so the output will be off. However, if the switch is on, then the wire will be powered. This wire will also be powered whenever a pulse comes down, and then the output of this will be on, So we only get an output of this whenever the pulse runs down it. We only get the output when the torch is on. And when the torch is off, it's going into an inverter, where it then inverts the power so that it is on. And then when a pulse runs down, this is on as well. And then this torch is then on. So the result of that is that when that switch is up and not activated, all output will be directed to this line. And when the torch is active and down, all output can only be directed to, or reversed, if the torch is up, all output will be directed to this line, and if the torch is down and active, all output will be directed to this line. So it acts as an if-else, so that if the torch is active, output is directed to this line, and if the torch is inactive, when a pulse comes in, it inverts it, and it is output to this line. And as you see, this line is hooked up to a piston, which will then push sand, and the other line is hooked up to another piston, which will then push gravel. So to give a short demonstration of this, I'm going to build a lowercase letter I in this frame. So for that, we're going to need a base, so we get our sand up and throw in one. And then we're going to need gravel, 3 pieces of that, pulse, pulse, pulse. And then we're going to need 1 more sand, pulse, 1 more gravel, and then to top it all off, we can add 1 more sand. And the result is a lowercase I, built perfectly. Now the only problem that you may have noticed is that it does break some of the stuff. It actually takes 2 for each use. That's just because I was too lazy to time it properly, and I used a button, so that makes the timing off and kind of breaks off multiple per pulse. But it's actually possible to not break that off if you get the timing correct. I just was a bit too lazy to even attempt it this time, since it really doesn't matter. I mean, either way, it still works. So as I said, this isn't particularly useful hooked up to this sort of machine unless you are sending large messages for some reason, and you want to build them without building them yourself, which I guess would be alright if you had a really tall scaffolding, then you didn't have a ladder to get up there, and this was the only means. And then you had some sort of pistons underneath them to drop the gravel onto some torches at your feet, very far below the scaffolding. So I guess you can make a messaging system that way, but then someone would still have to go and refill the sand and gravel eventually for each letter, or each vertical line of the letter, really. So there are some practical applications for this. It's just not here. This was just sort of a demonstration to show off sort of what its potential can be, and then it's up to you to actually find something worthwhile. So now I'll show you one last thing you can do with pulsating pistons, and that is automate your sugarcane farms in a very similar way as you do with cacti farms. In fact, this is just an imported cacti farm. My standard 3 cacti farms attached to each other with the second one in the middle, and all I've done is replaced the sand and the cacti with dirt and sugarcane, and then installed pistons on the sides to break the sugarcane off, similarly to the way I did in my automated farming video. I thought about putting this in the automated farming video, but I decided that since I forgot I would put it in here anyway. So now I've decided to just throw it in here since it fits in better anyway with the whole pulsating pistons thing. And it was a bit dry describing the random letter I maker up there. So just show you how it's done in the back here. After you hook up all your pistons and such, what you need to do is just set up a delayer that makes a pulse generator just like out there, except this one is going to be continuously generating a pulse instead of stopping. So all you need to do is set up some delayers and then have it go into itself. Right, so it's going in here and then in here and then all the way around, and then you're siphoning off the pulses via a linked up bit of redstone. So you start it up by tossing down a lever and then just tap tap, and then the pulses are going up the stairs. Never liked stairs. And then coming into a repeater so that it has enough power, and then just going on top of the pistons that are in the 3 rooms. Right here, in the center room, and in the side rooms. And that's just causing them to constantly pulsate and break off the sugarcane. Now, I don't have these in a very efficient position, because you'll notice that if, like in my automated farming video, one of these happened to launch a bit of sugarcane, it will hit the piston on the opposite side and just fall down onto the sugarcane like this, onto the dirt. You can solve that problem by just placing your pistons so that they're facing to the left and to the right, and then to the sides, I guess, and that should solve half of your problems. Unless you make it into a sort of spiral, then it might solve all of your problems. And they just flow down exactly like cacti do. So if you want to just sit away from your keyboard and collect a bunch of sugarcane for bookcases or something, they're pretty expensive in sugarcane, then you can just wire this up, and you can wire it up to your mob grinder collection zone and your cacti farm collection zone, and then you won't have to really do anything for a while collecting everything. And as any other thing that's powered, you can always just attach an AND gate to this so that you can have a switch to turn it off. So, you know, whenever a pulse is going, if the switch is inactive, it won't generate the pulse. So attach the AND gate if you want the kill switch. And there's one problem with this type of sugarcane harvesting, and that is that if you leave your pulse generator without a pulse, because it kills the pulse when you relog, and it's just stuck in that frozen state and you have to reset it each time. But if you leave it unattended and sugarcane decides to grow into your pre-existing pistons, so they're sticking out whenever it's on and it's just stuck in the on position because it hasn't been given pulses, then it will have sugarcane growing through the pistons and breaking off the ends. And you can see that here I left it unreset just so I can show you that. And the only way to reset it then is to just break the piston and replace it. I mean, you get the piston back, but it does get annoying since they take so long to break. But of course, it is worth it for having an easy and automated sugarcane farm. So that's all for now. See you next time.